Welcome to the show. Glad to have you with us here today. It is Wednesday, and we've got new things afoot on Wednesdays here on Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat and IB Nation Sportsbeat. Jesse Stiers is with me here today. Wednesday has, for a long time, traditionally been a mailbag day on the show, but as of today, we're mixing things up a little bit. Bryan Driskell, IrishBreakdown.com, is going to join me in about 25, 30 minutes or so. We're going to get an update on Notre Dame football recruiting. There's been a lot of recruiting news here recently for the Fighting Irish, and he's going to become a permanent Wednesday fixture. So the mailbag is going to move off Wednesdays, and it's looking like it's going to be Thursday is when we're going to have it. That's not going to make everybody happy, but I don't think we can make everybody happy, Jesse. We did a little poll, and it was pretty split, and I think Thursday is probably going to be our best option going forward.
The people have spoken, and Thursday has won.
It has. And it's also fewer conflicts with other things, whether it's Irish Breakdown things or like once the football season gets started. Salty says Thursday is the worst day. Well, for you, other people voted for it, though. And for us, it's not the worst day. So Bryan Driskell does a buy, sell, hold show on Mondays. So I don't think that's good. And Fridays, once we get into the season, we're going to be previewing Notre Dame football games. So, part of the equation is how do we move it, but also not have to move it again once the football season starts? So there are a lot of factors that we had to consider. But the main thing today is we're on a limited time basis, and we've only got 1 hour of this show tonight because we've got more baseball coming up later on this evening. So away we go. Dabo Swinney was on the Always College Football podcast with Greg McElroy this week. He decided to take a little jab at Notre Dame, and here's what the Clemson head coach had to say.
Always got to, have a chip on our shoulder. It just is what it is. We don't have the alumni base that some places have. We don't have some of the things that some of the schools that we've played and had to compete with over the years have. It's just the way it is. But I've always we're 3-1 against Ohio State. We're 4-2 against Notre Dame. Notre Dame has their own TV station. They make their own rules. They print their own money. They got like a money machine in the backyard or something. We've beaten Texas A&M a couple times. We've beaten Oklahoma a couple times. We've won 4 in a row against Auburn. We've beaten Nick Saban in Alabama in 2 national championships. And so, we've done all of that at Clemson. Again, when I got the job here, prior to our tenure here, Clemson hadn't won the ACC in 20 years, and it wasn't a 17-team league in those days.
All right, so there's Dabo Swinney, the Clemson head coach. Is it fair or foul, the shot that he took there at Notre Dame, Jesse?
I think it's completely foul. The thing that's the most frustrating, there's 2 comments in particular. Notre Dame prints its own money and makes its own rules. I think that was the most frustrating part because Notre Dame doesn't make their own rules. And again, Notre Dame has the TV contract and gets all the money from it because they're independent. If Clemson wanted to try to be independent, then they have more than every right to go down that path and print their own money as well. So I think the most frustrating part 2 is Dabo Swinney. I don't understand why you want the sympathy. What are you trying to get sympathy for? You have proven that you can beat, like he said, beat all these programs, and you're doing it your way. So I guess I'm just confused what the underlying reason was for taking a shot like this. Because is it because that you're on the downward slope and
I think that's it?
The best times are in your past, and so now you're kind of looking for excuses about how you can't catch back up? I think the issues are Dabo Swinney doesn't want to adjust with how college football is being run and played today, but he wants to cry like he's in some sort of, deficit compared to everyone else. You're putting yourself in that deficit. You aren't, doing what every other program is doing to stay ahead of the curve. Your best times have passed you and you don't want to catch back up with everyone. So now you got to shoot shots at all these other programs and say, well, we don't have this and we don't have that. But you're choosing not to have that. You're choosing not to go to the transfer portal. You're choosing how to go about your NIL situation. And so if everyone else is playing by the same set of rules and Dabo doesn't want to do that, then that's on Dabo at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's honestly it. I think that it's just another coach who's been around a while who is not adjusting to the current landscape of college football specifically and college athletics in general. All of the accomplishments, all those things that Dabo Swinney did he do them? Yeah. And look, give him credit. Like, I think it's fairly similar, like what Clemson has done in football. When you look at the size of the town, like Clemson, South Carolina itself, it's very similar to Storrs, Connecticut, like very small, remote towns, college towns, very small. Basically, the entire town almost is the university itself. UConn has won national championships in both men's and women's basketball at a small spot like Storrs, Connecticut, and Dabo won a couple national championships and had a lot of success at Clemson. So, I mean, give them credit for that, being able to do it at a non-traditional place, because that's just like he said, Clemson hadn't had a lot of success before Dabo showed up. But again, this is all pre-NIL and pre-transfer portal, and of the college football programs that were the power programs at the time that NIL and the portal really started taking off, he has fallen off the most. Like look at, like he also mentioned Alabama, Ohio State is schools that he's beaten. Yeah. Okay. Because he mentioned Oklahoma as well. Yeah. You've beaten them, but it's Notre Dame that he singled out in terms of the printing money and all this, different, like ask the basketball program how they, how that printing money is going for Notre Dame, like that's sort of the image that everyone has, that Notre Dame just has all these advantages because they've got their own TV contract and, everything else. It's, and like he's saying that they don't have, the alumni to pump things through there. Clemson has like roughly triple the enrollment of Notre Dame. So like the alumni base, he was talking about alumni base, the actual alumni base in numbers that Clemson has dwarfs Notre Dame's. It's just that, yeah, if you're like the Notre Dame alumni base happens to be a little bit more affluent, I think, and like in the big picture. So, so like, yeah, that's a thing, but he's got the national championships. Pat himself on the back. He did a great job. He took a program that didn't have a lot of success before him, and he won multiple national championships with them. Now the biggest question is, can you adjust? Look, like you were at the mountaintop when Indiana was still one of the bottom teams in the country. If Indiana can figure out how to navigate this thing as a state school, Clemson, a team that was already at the top and does have a large alumni base and a lot of other advantages that comes with it, playing in the ACC, and a good coach to boot, who has won a couple, again, national championships, he should be able to figure that out. But are you going to be the dinosaur, or are you going to learn how to adapt and survive this thing? Because that's what it comes down to, Dabo, is adapt or die, and you're not adapting right now, and you're dying a slow death. Might not be.
But he acts like he doesn't have NFL draft players galore, or sorry, NFL players galore. Like if I'm Dabo Swinney, you're telling me you can't reach out to, hey, Trevor Lawrence, remember all those good times we had? Remember that national championship we won? What do you think about donating $1 million to our NIL fund? Like it's not that hard. He's got plenty of, he's got Deshaun Watson that's making millions. He's got Trevor Lawrence. He's got an abundance of defensive players who have done really good things.
Got a big contract.
Yeah. Travis. It's to me, it's just kind of overall laziness of just wanting to come up with excuses. But how hard is he really trying to go out? And if he's, so concerned about how much money they do or don't have, what are you doing to go get more money? Essentially, how are you adding or allocating more NIL funds? Because you can't tell me there's not a single alumni in business, tech, NFL that's not willing to donate, a few $1 million at the end of the day to the Clemson NIL fund. I just don't think he wants to do it. He wants to be this old school kind of well, I can prove everyone I can do it how I did it 10 years ago and still be successful. Listen, Dabo, you had one of the most, a roster probably outside of Ohio State with the most draft picks in this previous draft, and you were a sub 500 team. I just think that's inexcusable at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, look, going into last year, most people thought that they were going to compete for a national championship and at least be a college football playoff team after they were in the playoffs the year before. And they were one of the most disappointing teams in the nation. Like them, Penn State would be at the top of the list in terms of the most disappointing teams around the country last year. And Chris lives in South Carolina. He says, don't believe that bleep. Clemson has the money. I do believe it. It's a matter of what you're going to do with it. And, like they might be sitting there right now, like we heard during the season last year, Dabo was kind of taking shots back, firing back at the Clemson fan base and different things like that. Yeah. And I mean, Chris says, Google Clemson alumni, you'll see. I don't doubt it. I completely believe that it's there. The question is, do they still support Dabo? Because it does feel like he is teetering right now. How much continued faith do they have in him? How much of this is just him trying to put up, sort of that facade and just deflect everything away from him? It sure feels like that to me. We all know he's had a lot of success, but again, it's like, can you adapt to the current times? Nick Saban, one of the programs that he did mention in his little rant there, that you beat Alabama a couple of times. Well, Nick Saban got out of the game because he didn't like the way the game was changing. So is Dabo Swinney going to do the same thing?
I think Clemson, though, has kind of bigger picture. I think Clemson has a decision to make within the next 2 years, just because if you allow Dabo to really sink this ship, there's potential that you can never bounce back from it. Clemson could be back in the original spot that, from when Dabo took over at the beginning of his tenure with Clemson. So you have to decide, if you want to cut ties with Dabo, you have to do so soon, because you can't let him bury everything that you've worked towards as a university and athletic department, reviving your football team. Because if you let it, die into the dirt, no one's going to want to coach. You're not going to be able to get a name like you could have maybe 5 years ago if you moved on from Dabo Swinney. So I honestly think they have a decision to make and say, hey, Dabo, we get it. You're not a fan of this NIL. You're not a fan of the transfer portal. You're not a fan of this and that. But you either have to change or we have to let you go, because we can't let you deteriorate this program that we have built up over the last 20 to 25 years.
Yeah, and I agree with what Sean Stewart is saying here. Is this is part of it as well when it comes to NIL.
Yeah, I mean, it's same with Saban.
You can't stack players the way you used to. Yeah, and that's exactly it. There's not the depth at places like Clemson or Alabama, where you just remain in the pipeline and you keep cranking out. If you're not starting within the first couple of years, obviously a lot of guys are going to bail, and that impacts him. And the fact that Clemson also, I mean, they've brought in at least a few more, but they're still way behind where everyone else is in terms of transfer portal. Like you can't keep those guys. They're going to enter the portal. You can't keep them the way he used to. You can't stack that depth like Sean is talking about there. And you're also not bringing him in. That's, again, that lands you where you are right now. And when you really flop in terms of what everyone thought was a 5-star quarterback like they just had last year, that can obviously set you back as well, because you had other quarterbacks transfer out in the meantime.
Yeah, completely agree. I think, though, what this should highlight as well is how impressive of a job Marcus Freeman has done in terms of the recruiting in the NIL, because Notre Dame is deep at almost every position. And that's kind of the old school way of Saban and Dabo pre-NIL. And so the fact that Marcus Freeman can sell these guys on, hey, you might not get as big of an NIL package, but what we can offer you, other things. We want you to learn. We want you to develop. And then once your opportunity comes, you're going to get that chance to be a premier player. It feels like Dabo's facing the tough position of a lot of his players are coming and going. He can't retain guys. He can't land as many big names. And if they do come, they want to transfer, get in the portal and leave at some point. So I think it really highlights how well Marcus Freeman continues to recruit and how well he continues to build this roster at the end of the day.
And it also helps make things a little bit spicy, considering Notre Dame and Clemson are about to enter into a 12-year scheduling agreement.
Yeah, it's like, was that maybe part of this? Was he just adding fuel to the fire because he knows that this rivalry is going to start, heating up? I don't know. I don't think he's that smart, at the end of the day.
I think this is more about him. I think this is more about deflecting blame from him and trying to remind everyone, hey, I'm a great coach. Remember what I did? It feels like it's slipping away.
Yeah, I mean, he's trying to remind everyone that he did more with less, and now he can't do more with less anymore, but it's not his fault.
Right. Again, it kind of comes back to, what's the market disadvantage, like the whole analytics and Moneyball and all that kind of stuff. Look, he hit on some big time quarterback recruits. That was a big part of his success. He also hit pretty good on the offensive and defensive lines. Pretty good part of his success. Had some good he could recruit, but the game is just a lot different right now. All right, I also wanted to touch on the American Football Coaches Association and this vote that their group had, their board of trustees. They want to make some changes to the college football playoffs and the college football calendar. The two biggest changes the AFCA board of trustees plans to recommend are an end to conference championship games and an expansion of the college football playoff to 24 teams. And it feels to me like if you're going to expand to 24, like it's pretty much mandatory that you're going to get rid of the conference championship games for starters, don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's almost, if you want expansion, you're going to have to get rid of the conference champ. It's a week that's not needed for an already expanding format. And so this, if you have conference championships, you have a 24 team, I mean, this thing's not going to be over until like the beginning of February almost by the time it's all said and done. And so, I mean, the conference championship games are pointless as is. We've said this for a long time. It's just an overall money grab. I mean, the bulk of your work is done through the regular season when you play a conference schedule. There's no reason to play these extra games, and the first round of the playoffs can easily replace them.
Exactly.
Especially if you're allowing more teams in from conferences, because you'll still get the payback. Like, you know what I mean? Like your third and fourth place teams, or, second and third place, maybe fourth place teams are going to be playing in those first rounds. You're going to get money from those games as is. And so that should be enough to replace conference championships.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to get money, but the question is how you make it up big picture. Cause like the short term, it's, I don't know how much the TV, contracts and things like that are going to change and pay out. But that's the biggest obstacle. I think that especially, like the Power Four conferences, there's a lot of money involved, like from the TV standpoint itself. So you've got to figure out how you're going to help offset that. But again, you have to free up space in the calendar if you're going to go to 24. Because like you said, nobody wants to be playing until February, including the coaches. And that's part of this. So they want to do those two things, expand the playoff to 24, get rid of the conference championship games. They also want to move the start of the college football season up a week. So basically week 0 becomes week 1. And then they would also, because now we're getting these multiple bye weeks during the season, they would get rid of the second bye week. You only get one off week during the season. And they would also reduce the minimum number of days between games to no fewer than 6. And they also want to protect that exclusive window for the Army-Navy game in December, while allowing postseason games also to be played on the same day, because, the Army-Navy game becomes a factor here. One, do Army and Navy, as a group of 6 potential champion, like, do they want to, especially if you're expanding to 24, you're going to increase the chances that they could get into the college football playoff. But right now, the first or second round of a 24-team playoff would be the Saturday that Army and Navy are playing. So at a very minimum, they want to preserve the window so that there's no other games going on when Army-Navy is. But you've also, because there might be playoff games that day, but then, again, Army and Navy potentially have a decision to make if they want to move that game so that they, could potentially be included in the college football playoff at some point.
Yeah, I think that there's certain things that always have to be preserved within the college football landscape. I thought Notre Dame and USC would always be one of those, but obviously here we are today. But Army Navy falls under that category as well. I think that you have to find a way to continue to play that game. And if it means that, it has no repercussions, basically it's like, okay, Army and Navy are going to play each other just like they do, but maybe the seedings and everything are already determined, right? Like that game is kind of just played out of honor rather than having an impact on, their chances of making or not making the playoff as a group of 6 champion.
Right. And then the other side of this is, again, they want to move the schedule up and start the playoffs earlier, like the Dan Lanning plan. Basically, don't have this big 3 to 4 week layoff in between games and go right from the regular season into the playoffs. Keep it rolling so you're done by the first or second Monday in January. Because then what that also means, by finishing earlier in January, then you wait until everyone's done, then the transfer portal opens, so that it's like it's not this complete, because it wasn't a complete mess, but there were definitely some complications when you had the playoffs going on and the portal open in January and people kind of complaining about that. I agree with what Robert is saying here in the chat. He says if this happens, Notre Dame's sitting pretty with no conference championship. What argument will the haters have with the joint of conference red herring? This is what I've been saying all along. As much as like 24 teams in the playoff might seem a bit ick to a lot of people, the combination of one, expanding to 24 benefits Notre Dame because there's more access, and two, it also benefits Notre Dame going, because like USC, for example, if the playoffs expand to 24, what excuse does USC or really anyone have for not wanting Notre Dame on the schedule anymore? Because you're going to have plenty of 3-loss teams that get in the playoffs. Like the more it expands, the greater that helps Notre Dame to ensure future scheduling and basically keeping independence. Notre Dame's always going to have a path to the playoff with a 24-team field, and there's more incentive for other teams to continue to schedule Notre Dame going forward with a 24-team field.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. The potential of expansion to 24 and the elimination of conference championships games does nothing but, destroy everyone's favorite non-truthful argument about Notre Dame's situation.
You can't say Notre Dame's not playing in a conference championship game.
Yeah, within the college football landscape. So, the more and more that conferences become irrelevant, and I think that's naturally going to happen with these 4 mega power conferences and the need or the desire to continuously expand, it's just basically going to be almost a free-for-all where everyone's just kind of playing everyone, and really conference alignment isn't going to mean too much.
Yep, exactly. Well, this conversation won't die here. I'm sure, we've got the next couple of days. I'm sure this might come up before the end of the week. Once again, we've got a little bit of an abbreviated show today. I didn't even mention we don't have a second hour of the show today, and Bryan Driskell is going to join me next to talk some Notre Dame football recruiting. So a little bit of a sprint through the first half hour of the show. Jesse is off. Is it baseball practice that's on your agenda tonight, or is it something else?
Volleyball's tonight.
Volleyball tonight. I thought you already had volleyball this week.
No. Volleyball Wednesdays, baseball Thursdays.
All right. It's always something. All right, Jess. Enjoyed the quick hit. I will talk to you again on Friday.
See ya.
Sounds good. Jesse is out. I'm going to take a break. When I come back, we've got more Notre Dame football recruiting talk with Bryan Driskell from IrishBreakdown.com. We'll get an update. We'll see kind of how this 2027 recruiting class is shaping up after 4 big commitments in less than a week. We will do that when we return. Budweiser's Weekday Sportsbeat with IrishBreakdown.com. We continue Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Brian Driskell from IrishBreakdown.com is here. Time to talk a little bit more Notre Dame football recruiting. This is we've kind of been teasing this, that Wednesday is going to be our new regular recruiting day on the show, and so Brian's going to be dropping in every week to update what's going on. But I mean, right now this is like the third time in less than a week, Brian, that people are going to start talking, I think, at some point.
Hey, they might be talking about, hey, Sean's taking his ban of Driskell off of the show. This is awesome. I love it.
That's right. The ban is lifted. That's right.
I'm
now
finally
people are
back
gonna
in
go,
Sean's good
now
graces.
you're going to have people talking, what, there was a ban? What's going on?
No, I know, right? I shouldn't have said that. Now people are going to believe it, especially
I know.
around here. But I'm excited. Recruiting's ramping up. That's why this is the perfect time. You know, I mean, signed landed 4 commitments in the last week, and some big ones, obviously, but a lot more to come. A lot more. At least a lot more better come, because they're not quite where they need to be with this class yet, although they're off to a great start.
Yeah, I mean, they're working, you know, like you said, Champ Mons, the quarterback, Aiden O'Neill, the defensive end, and then earlier this week, Titus Hawk and Jackson Coleman, all for the 2027 class. I wanted to ask you that I was thinking about this the other day. I mean, it's been, what, a month and a half now since St. Patrick's Day. It's just flown right by. Why no pot of gold? Do you know why they decided not to do that this year? Or maybe any more? You know, I don't know.
Yeah, I just think it's because it wasn't their thing. It was Chad's thing. And they did it last year because they'd already put a lot of work into it. And so,
gotcha.
Yeah, it's probably, and then, you know, they want to be doing offers differently now. I think a lot of it just had to do with, it was Chad's thing. So we're going to do our own thing, but I think it's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, you know,
that's exactly how I feel. And that's why I just wish sometimes you put egos aside sometimes and just say, you know what, like, this is a pretty cool thing. And obviously the roster that we have right now, if you're looking at it from their standpoint, the roster we have right now that everybody thinks is one of the best in the country was in large part put together during his tenure as the recruiting coordinator. There's no need to be that way. I mean, there's other reasons too that are also practical. Like, we don't want to wait until March to offer some of these top players, and that's fine. Then re-offer kids. But I just feel like even if you're not going to do a pot of gold where you're just offering a bunch of kids that day, you should still have some sort of St. Patrick's Day push, because there's no other what other team has a holiday that you associate with your football program? Like, why wouldn't you make that a thing? Even if you don't want it to be an offer push, because you want to practically get offers out sooner. I mean, they're already offering 29 kids, Sean. I mean, it's just and they have to be. They can't wait till next March to start offering the best 29 kids. They're going to be too far behind. Or actually be the 29 kids. You're going to be too far behind, but they're still do something on St. Patrick's Day moving forward.
Feels like a natural. Like it like when they did
100%.
Start doing it, felt like a natural that they were doing something on St.
You're like, why haven't they been doing? Because like Chad didn't start that. That actually started before Chad got here, I believe. I think that actually started. I think Mike Elson was still here when that kind of got rolling, but maybe I'm incorrect on that. But I remember them doing things like that before. But it's definitely something you need to. Stanford has Arbor Day.
Stanford has Arbor Day. I love it. Here's a tree.
Yeah, I love it. Love it.
Plant a tree. Come.
Yeah. Like I said, nobody else has let me rephrase. Nobody else has a cool, holiday that people associate with their program. Yeah.
All right. So let's kind of take a little bit more macro view. These first couple times you've been on these last 2 weeks, we've obviously talked about the 4 specific guys who've committed. So the 2027 class in general, I believe it's 14 commitments now. So where do things kind of stand overall with this 27 class?
Well, they've really been kind of rocking and rolling. So one thing that Notre Dame did this season that was different from the past is they waited until March to start bringing a lot of kids on campus in the winter. In the past, they started having junior days in January and February. And I believe where this came from, Sean, a year ago, they didn't bring guys on campus in January, February because they were overhauling the recruiting staff. I mean, Chad had left in like late January, early February. Then it took you a little bit because you had the James Blanchard attempt to hire him, and you didn't really get Mike Martin on campus till like later in February. So by the time you got to March, you're like, dude, we're just now scrambling to kind of get this whole thing going. Well, bringing guys in March actually ended up working out great for the staff, and they obviously put together the #1 recruiting class in the country. And so I think they took a different approach this year. So look, let's try to get more kids on campus for Irish Invasion early as sophomores and juniors. let's get more kids on campus in the fall to watch games, not bring them on campus in the 3 coldest months of the year in South Bend, and then start waiting until we get to like March. And I mean, it's still cold in March and April, but and get kids to practice and let them see the coaches. And it's worked great. I think it's really turned out to be a smart strategy. And so they've doubled their class since Visit started. I mean, when Visit started, you had the 2 offensive line commits, James Halter and Richie Flanagan, who ironically, both of their dads played at Notre Dame, talented players. You had Amari Irvin at linebacker. You had Zay Hassan, who's a top 50 national player at corner. You had Ace Austin, who's a top 100 player at cornerback. And then you had the long snapper in Sean Kraft. So you had the 2 O-linemen, a linebacker, 2 DBs, and then you had Khalil Terry, who has since decommitted. And then you've added really 8 players since that all started. Obviously, you've added 2 DBs and Zayden Gamble, who's a really talented player from Florida. John Gay III, you added from Florida, who's a nickelback. They added Aiden O'Neal, obviously, last week, Jackson Coleman, Champ Mons, and Titus Hawk. And then, of course, they had, after the first recruiting weekend, they landed the 2 running backs, Lathan Wissington and Isaiah Rogers. So you're really on fire here the last month, Sean. And the running back class is very underrated. They're not like Lathan Wissington. I think the highest ranking for him is like 173. That is a bad ranking. I said when Jadarian Price is coming out, Sean, you'll remember we talked about this on your show. I was like, this kid is vastly underrated. This is a no-brainer top 100 recruit. Nobody had him in the top 150, barely in the top 200. Lathan Wissington is a 6 foot, 205-pound running back from Texas who plays, I think, 6A, 5A, 6A football in Texas. I forget what levels they're at, but like he's one of the bigger levels.
Sure.
And he averages like about 9 yards a carry. And oh, by the way, this 6 foot, over 200-pound running back just recently ran a 10.43 in the 100-meter dash down in Texas. Like he's a big-time player, and I feel a lot about him the way I felt about Jadarian coming out of high school. Like vastly underrated, and it happens in Texas and Florida because there's so many. That's what I was going to say.
Is it easy for guys to kind of get lost a little bit?
Much easier because like, oh, he rushed for 1,500 yards and 9 yards a carry. That's not an uncommon theme in Texas. You know what I mean? So I think that's part of it a little bit as well. But he's a very talented back. The secondary class is off to a great start. Mike Mickens had 3 kids committed. Zay Hassan and Xavier and Ace Alston are very talented corners that Aaron Henry inherited. And now he's added to it with Zayden Gamble and John Gay. So they're starting to roll. Their strategy is a little bit different than in the past, Sean, because under Chad Bowden, they wanted to load up as quickly as possible, which you needed to do then because you were really trying to rebuild. Back then, you're selling what? A first-year head coach who's really nice guy and personable, but coming off a 9-4 year where you lost to Marshall and a 3-9 Stanford team. So you were selling hope. And when you're selling hope, you've got to get kids early and hang on as best you can to those talented players.
Right.
And they landed a bunch, but then lost some. You lost Peyton Bowen and Keon Keeley and Deuce Knight. Well, now that Notre Dame has kind of become one of the big dogs, they can be a little bit more choosy and say, we don't have to fill up on our offensive line class. If we got to wait it out to get Albert Simeon, then we're going to wait it out. If we got to wait it out to get this guy, they're going to wait it out because we can now go toe-to-toe with these big-time programs because, A, our product on the field is outstanding. B, we're putting guys in the NFL. And C, we can compete with anybody when it comes to NIL if we want to. Right? I mean, they're being smart about it. They're just not throwing money around to a 3-star DB just because they don't want to lose them to USC. They're being smart about it. But those things are like why they're recruiting at a very different level than they have been, and the strategy's changed, and it's a smart strategy. They needed to do it the way they did it under Chad, but Mike Martin and the staff are doing it a different way now because it's what's best for the program with where it is now.
Yeah, and I mean it's obviously reflected when you look at the composition of the roster. You know that it's worked out, and you just have to do things different now. So then, when you look then overall. What do you think of what they've got so far in this 27 class? What would you say is the strength of the 27 class right now?
It is a no doubt top 10 class right now. I would say it's closer to being in the bottom of the top 10 right now. And the top 10 ranking is built on, as I just mentioned, an outstanding running back duo. We talked about Lathan Wissington. They also landed a kid from Massachusetts named Isaiah Rogers, very talented running back, a top 200 caliber guy. Dynamic athlete. He's also been reported as having run a 10.5 100-meter dash. He's also a 5'11", 205 pounds. So these aren't like little skinny guys that got to get in the weight room and put weight on. Like they're put together. You know, that Like, Notre Dame likes backs that are put together. Jadarian was jacked up. Jeremiah became a jacked up guy. They fit the system really well. That was a home run hire. And Jaywan Sider to go out and get 2 really good backs in a year after he landed 2 other really good backs is really a recruiting coup to get that kind of talent. But it also speaks to where it gets a lot easier to recruit, Sean, when you can look at and say, look what we've done on the field and in the NFL draft. Think about this recruiting pitch if you're Jaywan Sider. Listen, buddy, you could play 4 years at Notre Dame and start 0 games, and be a first-round draft pick.
Yeah.
That makes recruiting a lot easier. So like, okay, yeah, they've already got a running back. So look what they just did in the NFL draft. Now, they're not going to do that every year, but you get the point. So that's obviously a strong foundation of the class. You look in the secondary, Sean, as I mentioned earlier, Zay Hassan is a top 50 national player at cornerback. He's from North Carolina. Very talented cover player, can play zone, can play man, could play nickel. And if the need arose and it was going to get him on the field faster, I think he's physical enough and rangy enough to play safety. Ace Alston is a really talented cornerback from Ohio. They've both reaffirmed their commitments with the new staff coming along because they were recruited by Mike Mickens. And so they've reaffirmed their commitments. Ace Alston is also a top 100 player. He's more of an outside corner that could also play nickel. He's more of a pure corner, where Zay Hassan is a lot like Dallas Golden. Where's he going to play? Wherever gets him on the field the fastest. I mean, he's literally that kind of player, can play all over. And then when you add John Gay III, who's a very underrated player from Florida, he's about 6'2". They view him as a nickel safety, meaning they're going to start him off at nickel, but then also play him at safety as well, which I think was they really wanted sort of that rangy nickel type of player in this class. Because as we saw, Sean, their nickel depth chart outside of Nick Reddish was a bunch of guys they recruited to play somewhere else. Christian Gray, Dallas Golden, Jaden Sanders, guys like that. They're starting to recruit guys that they project to play there and come in and play there, but can also play another position, safety, corner.
Basically what Caleb Downs did at Ohio State with nickel and safety.
Yes. Yeah. And he'll start and be like a pure nickel early, but then cross train at safety to where if you can get on the field doing that, you can do that, certainly. And I like that strategy because you're seeing, and the thing is, John Gay III does that in high school. So because high school teams are shifting to more of the 4-2-5 type of, 5 secondary players, you're seeing more guys that play the nickel position. So there's not as much projection as needed. And then, of course, they got Zayden Gamble. And then I like the offensive line class. It's a good foundation on the offensive line class. They've just got to add to it. James Halter's a very talented right tackle. He goes to Central Catholic in Pittsburgh. His dad, Jordan, played at Notre Dame. Richie Flanagan's an interior guy, kind of a guard center prospect. Was originally committed, Sean, as a D tackle. But because the board at defensive line, which I know we'll get to, is so good, they recruited him as a kind of, he can play either or, but initially it was D line. He's now considered an O-line prospect because of how things are going. And I like him better as an O-line prospect. His dad is Jim Flanagan, who was a part of the 1993 team, played defensive line. And he's the younger brother of James Flanagan, who is a redshirt freshman tight end. So, and then the final piece is Amari Irvin. That's an interesting backstory, Sean. So his brother is Cedric Irvin Jr., who was committed to Notre Dame under Brian Kelly. And then the new staff came on and they dropped him. They said, hey, listen, we like you, but the reality is we don't think that you can play for us. And so they dropped him. And so there was some hard feelings early on with the family. It ended up working out for Notre Dame because they went and got Jeremiah Love after that. So I think it worked well. And Cedric Irvin Jr. went to Stanford and got a degree from Stanford, or is working on getting a degree from Stanford. So I think it worked out well for him too. Amari Irvin is his younger brother. So obviously some fences were able to be mended in that regard. And I think over time, the family appreciated that Notre Dame was honest with him instead of bringing him in, knowing he can't play for him and doing it right away and not stringing him along until they landed somebody else. So I thought that was an interesting backstory, but he's not your typical Notre Dame linebacker. He's about 5'11", 6 foot, 220, 225, but he's really explosive in the box, very powerful hitter. Shows good range and coverage. He's got a lot of talent. He just doesn't have the typical, 6'2 plus rangy body type that Notre Dame goes after. But outside of that, he's got a lot of talent and fits this defense very well. So it's a very strong foundation to build upon, Sean. But whether or not this class ranks as a top 5 unit, obviously is going to be about what they do over the next 2 months.
All right. So on that subject, what do they need to do over these next couple of months to finish this 2027 class on a strong note?
The absolute biggest thing they need to do is they need to finish strong in the trenches. Because right now you've got 3 players committed on both sides of the ball combined. You have 2 offensive linemen, you want 4, and you have 1 defensive lineman, you want 5. And so it's about finishing. On the offensive line, there's 3 names on the board. You got to get 2 of them. One is Albert Simeon, who will be visiting officially on June 19th. And he's a big-time player, Sean. He's 6'4", 295, long arms, really athletic, really physical. Great kid. Mom loves Notre Dame, high academic kid. There's just one problem. He's from Louisiana, and Notre Dame doesn't have a ton of success there. They've only landed 1 player in the last decade from Louisiana, which makes me feel super old, because I'm like, well, no, Tillery was there. And then you think, oh my gosh, Tillery was all the way back in 2015. So and obviously, or actually be 2 from Louisiana last 10 years, yeah. Osbury and Michael Young. So they've landed 2 from Louisiana last 10 years. I always forget about Michael Young, who's a great kid, but you got to get him. And then obviously Leighton Von Brandt, who's a top 100 recruit from Delaware. And then Cameron Wagner, who's a big physical offensive lineman from Illinois. You've got to get 2 of those 3, and you've got a really good offensive line class. Then on the other side, this is where they really got to finish strong. There's really 6 guys on the board right now. You've got to get 4 of them, and I like their chances to get 4 of them. On the edge, you got Abraham Cisse, who's a really long, twitchy, 6'5", 225-pound kid from just outside of Philadelphia in Downingtown. He is like on the same level as like Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer Tade, right? And we talk about this. You've got to stack classes, and that's one position, as we mentioned last week, they haven't done that yet. So you've got to get Abraham Cisse. They're the leader right now. You also have Jackson Vaughn, who's a defensive end from New Jersey, Bergen Catholic, who reclassified to the 27 class. He's a big-time player. He was the best defensive lineman on campus at Irish Invasion last year. He's a big-time talent. They want to get him. They lead for both right now. Now it's just about, can you close over the next couple months? And I like where they're at. Then on the inside, this is where they don't have anybody yet. So, and you're fighting some battles here. On May 15th, David Fuller-Runshoe is going to announce a decision between Notre Dame, Miami, Michigan, Texas Tech, and Georgia. He's the number, I think, 9 player in the country, according to On Threes from Chicago, St. Patrick. There is a nice Notre Dame connection there. His head coach is a guy named Tom Zbikowski. I think you might have heard of him, Sean, maybe back in the day. Maybe. And yeah. the I don't know if it's the dean or what they call it at private schools, but the headmaster, whatever the case may be, principal, I'm not sure what his role is Dan Santucci, who was a starting offensive lineman and a teammate of Tom Zbikowski. Right. And so there's obviously some ties, but there's some money being thrown around, and Miami's pushing hard. They've had great success in Chicago in recent years, especially with defensive linemen. It's a Notre Dame-Miami battle coming down the stretch. Notre Dame, I like where they're at right now, but now it's closing time, right? You got to get him. And then the other D tackle, I know everybody talks about Marcus Fakatu, and he's a great talent, and I'd love him in the class. But I think the biggest must-get that Notre Dame needs on the defensive tackle is actually Braden Parks, who's from Chicago also. He goes to Brother Rice. He's not ranked as high. That's why some people don't like him as much. But he's the pure interior guy, where Fuller-Runshoe and Fakatu are kind of, they can play some big end and 3 technique, and they're disruptives. Braden Parks is that 300-pounder that you put in the middle of the defense and say, dominate. It's like Hawk, smash. That's what you do with Braden Parks. You know what I mean? And sure. I think he's a very underrated player. If Jackson Vaughn wasn't the best player at Irish Invasion last year at D-line, then it was Braden Parks. And David Fuller-Runshoe was at Irish Invasion also, but those guys were even more impressive. Braden Parks is that kind of kid that I also think can help you day one. Like I said, 6'3 plus, 300 pounds, had over 20 tackles for loss last year, and did that on a defensive line where the other D tackle signed with Illinois in the 26 class, and their best defensive end's a kid named Cam McGee, who's a 5-star in the 28 class. So they played on a loaded D-line, and he still went out last year and isn't just a run, just as a plugger. He's disruptive. He had over 20 tackles for loss, over 7 sacks. He's the kind of big-time, massive young player they need to get more of on the middle of their defense. And so that's why he's at the top of my must-get board. But if you can get 2 of Fuller-Runshoe, Parks, and Fakatu, that's an elite D-line haul. And there's an outside chance, Sean, that they get all 3. I don't know if that'll happen because, you get 2 of them. Will the third one want to come? Right. But it's possible they get all 3. I just say get 4 of those 5, and you're having an elite defensive line haul. Yeah, like especially that interior defensive line. This is kind of maybe kind of one of the last sort of key pieces that I think we're
waiting to
100%.
come
Because
together for them.
you had an elite D-line class last year. You've got to start stacking those up back-to-back years.
Yeah.
And they have a shot, Sean. I would say that of the 5 players I'd mentioned, I would argue that Notre Dame is the leader for at least 4 of those 5. There's another kid from Texas they just got on named Xavier Muhammad, who's also an interior guy that I like a lot. He reminds me a lot of Kari Wilder, who was a top 50 recruit last year that Notre Dame liked and ended up going to Ohio State. And then the final piece of the puzzle for me, Sean, is on the other side of the ball. You need to start getting more game changers at wide receiver. And there's a young man named Julius Jones Jr., who we talked about recently, I believe, that Notre Dame is really trying to push for. If they get him, I think they call it a day at wide receiver.
Wow.
Because, well, I mean, you got 15 scholarship receivers on the roster right now. 14 of those 15 have eligibility beyond next season. 13 of the 15 have freshman or sophomore eligibility. So it's more about focusing on impact talent, especially since you got 5 true freshmen last year. It's about impact talent instead of numbers. And obviously they wanted that tall, fast, vertical player, which they got in Jackson Coleman. Now you're looking for that game changer, and that's what Julius Jones Jr. is for Notre Dame.
All right. Well, we're running out of time here. So do you have anything you want to hit real quick?
I forgot to mention they also have a commitment from the number 1 long snapper in the country. Sean Kraft is literally ranked as the number 1 long snapper in the country. So, I mean, it doesn't get a lot of the buzz, but everybody
is this the kid from North Carolina
until they miss one. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Very talented snapper.
Someone was asking Vince about that the other day, and Vince said he's out of the long snapper evaluation process. So.
He's legit. Even I can watch his film and know he's good.
That's right. All right, great stuff. I mean, we ran out of time. We probably could have kept going there for a little bit longer, but we're going to have to wind it down today. Appreciate you coming on, Bryan. Tell everybody who is not an Irish Breakdown subscriber where they can find all the juiciest intel, whether it's recruiting or anything else.
Boards.irishbreakdown.com is the place to be. Boards.irishbreakdown.com. That's our premium board, $6.99 a month or $69.99 for a year. We put our intel piece. I'm putting 2 intel pieces up today, talking about the must-get recruits and where they stand. And of course, for your podcast listening pleasure, wherever you listen to your podcast, type in Irish Breakdown. And if you're a YouTube watcher, you like to look at our beautiful mugs, which I say sarcastically, then you can type in Irish Breakdown on your YouTube feed, and you can find us at all those places. And for our free content, make it simple. Go to irishbreakdown.com.
All right, sounds great. Thanks again, Bryan.
My pleasure.
Bryan's going to be here every Wednesday talking Notre Dame football recruiting. So that is going to do it for today's show. It is short. It is sweet. We'll have another short and sweet one tomorrow. Vince will be in with me. We're also going to talk about some of the big news coming to Indiana this week on tomorrow's show. NIL coming to high schools, and also no shot clock coming to high schools. Got that, plus Kevin Corrigan, Notre Dame men's lacrosse. That's all coming up tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com.